Previously on Off the Charts.
I'm just in general a huge believer in this Rams team. I think McVay's been waiting to have a quarterback like Stafford his entire career, but now that he has him, the passing game's just exploded.
The Cowboys offense determines this game. So really for me, the game comes down to the Cowboys, and the only way they lose this game, I think, is if they beat themselves.
Hi, and welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Mark Simon, joined by SIS VP of Football Matt Manocherian.
What's up, Mark?
And Football Rookie Handbook co-author John Todd.
It's good to be back.
Let's recap Week 3. It always starts with the kickers. Justin Tucker, Mason Crosby. We salute you. If you wanted a couple of teams to prove themselves to you, the Rams did, the Chargers did, cap tip to them. And the quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, couple of clutch throws. Josh Allen decimates Washington. Sorry, John. On the other side, Justin Fields maybe not ready for prime time, and Big Ben looking like his best days are behind him. Matt, what was your biggest takeaway from the Week 3 games?
My biggest takeaway is, man, I'm going to miss Peyton and Eli for these next 3 Monday nights. One of my favorite things that's happened in the entire season so far was hearing Peyton ask LeBron about man versus zone coverage and what they like to see, and comparing across sports. What I found super interesting is in both basketball and football, in the NFL, NBA level, more teams are playing man rather than zone coverage. Obviously, whole different level in the NBA. They used to not even allow zone coverage, just like 10 years ago, but almost exclusively man in the NBA. But you see some zone sprinkled in. NFL, a man-heavy league. And yet here you have Peyton Manning and LeBron James agreeing that they'd rather see man coverage when they're out there than zone coverage because it's more predictable. They know what to expect. They know where people are. I could go on a diatribe about why I think man versus zone coverage is a good idea, bad idea, the situations where I think it is. At the end of the day, it comes down to some research that John Shirley has done. John Shirley, our fantastic researcher, he's put together this work that shows that basically the reason why teams are better at man than zone on average is because teams that play man on the NFL level are the teams that can play man, right? It's a chicken and egg thing. Hearing Peyton Manning and LeBron James kind of opine on it and to hear their opinion as two of the greatest ever, that they'd rather see man, despite the fact that we see on both of their leagues, more teams play man and man is more effective on average. It was just fascinating to me.
John, what was yours?
And LeBron talking about his old football days and throwing his high school quarterback under the bus too. That was a good one. For me, it was the Bears offensively got about as dominated as you'll ever see at the NFL level. You don't see that too much. That's more of a college thing. But everyone's talking about Justin Fields' one net passing yard because of all the sacks he took, how Nagy tried to fit him into the Dalton offense and scheme things for him to succeed individually, but they couldn't run the ball either. And I thought this was crazy. As an offense, they ended drives having lost yardage from where they started those drives on literally over half of their possessions during the game, which is insane. They only had one drive that lasted more than 5 plays all day. The Browns had only one that lasted less than 5 plays all day. Total domination by the Browns defensive front. And, I had the Browns as one of our teams in our annual SIS mock draft back in the spring, and realized then just how few holes this team had across the board. And then they went out and had one of our higher rated draft classes bringing in. Those guys are performing. Greg Newsome, JOK, even Anthony Schwartz is playing a lot early. So Browns have a very good, complete team. They can win in a lot of different ways. I'm really interested to see how far they can go this year.
So what's funny about that is it's not that long ago that the kind of game that the Bears had against the Browns would have been the kind of game that the Browns would have had on offense, maybe even against the Bears. All right, staying with rookie quarterbacks for a second, because there's certainly a couple to discuss here. It does look a little hopeless for Justin Fields and Zach Wilson. Matt, where do you things stand with those two guys, and what your take is on them?
I would go a little bit easy there, Mark, on being panicked about it or looking hopeless in any sort of a way. For these guys, I mean, we're talking about rookie quarterbacks here. Sometimes it's going to look good. Sometimes it's going to look not as good. It's not looking like Justin Herbert so far, but let's be real about the situations that each of these guys got into here. Both of these franchises have been in a rough place right now. I think that as we see them get behind better offensive lines, as we see them get better weapons, as we see them get more experience, there's plenty of time for them to right the ship, especially Justin Fields. We're really talking about just barely over 1 game of action so far. But who I would be panicked about is Ryan Pace and Joe Douglas, because those guys don't have time to see these guys develop and pan out. Like, if we don't have a good season this year from Justin Fields or Zach Wilson, and these franchises continue to struggle as much as they appear to have struggled so far this year, then that's going to be bad news for those guys. Because I don't know how you can, kind of extend the clock given the early returns that we've seen there. So I don't feel like it's hopeless for those quarterbacks at all, but I would feel a little bit panicked if I was one of those general managers.
it's one of those things too where the impatient society kind of takes over. That's basically what you're saying. Because, as if you remember, going back, and this is obviously 30-ish years ago, Peyton Manning was 3-13 as a rookie. You have to let your guys develop, right?
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. So on the old salary scale, you had rookies that were making tons and tons of money on their first contracts. And so you really didn't have the liberty to try them out. And then if it didn't work a year or two later, you were just on to the next one. You really, you invested in these guys. And so there was a real pull to try to make sure that they had every opportunity to succeed. So it was a different era in terms of the way things like that goes. I agree with you that we can't be everything here now, like we tend to be in football. Pump your brakes, have some patience. But the counterpoint to that is with the current rookie wage scale, you have these guys on the 4-year deal. If they're first round picks, you can extend them to the 5th year and keep them on that cost controlled contract. If you look at like Cleveland right now, for example, they're not very excited that they're going to have to pay Baker Mayfield market rate, because then all of that talent that we were just talking about on the rest of their team, all those guys have to get paid, and it's harder to keep everybody around, no matter how many draft picks Sashi and them stockpiled. So it becomes something where you have to manage it, and you have to manage when you pay that quarterback. So the faster you can get going as a young player, the more advantageous situation it is for your franchise. That's why you got Russell Wilson in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, another great example. We got to be a little bit balanced. And as much as I'd like to say, be patient, the fact of the matter is, in the current NFL, the way that the rules are, I don't know if you're incentivized to be patient in the way that you were in the past.
John, I want to segue to another quarterback situation. We're going to talk about the things that we got right in week 3, certainly. As you heard in the show intro, we felt really good about the Rams and Matthew Stafford. Matt figured that the Cowboys would dominate. John, let's look at the 49ers. What are your thoughts on the Garoppolo Trey Lance situation? Do the 49ers need to make a change, or does the status quo kind of work for them at this point?
So to me, the glass half full breakdown is that the 49ers are a competitive team against anyone they play with this current offense and quarterback. Maybe the ceiling is capped a bit in the long term, but right now they can play against anybody and compete. Garoppolo obviously lacks dynamism with his arm and his legs, but he's capable of operating within this offense, having modern enough success to move the ball with his actual skill set, while the scheme itself is carrying most of the heavy lifting. If you want a perfect example, you can look at the first drive of the second half that the 49ers had in the game against Green Bay last week. Almost every play was some kind of misdirection, play action, move the pocket, window dressing, all the staples that Kyle Shanahan's most known for.
It was beautiful stuff. I will say that. It was some pretty stuff.
It was great. Manufactured all that stuff. That's what I'm talking about. That Garoppolo can operate within that. His skill set doesn't have to shine, because the offense is just manufacturing all these open receivers and stuff. The 3 plays on the drive that weren't really using all those different things were a terrible check down into man coverage, busted play kind of, and then a perfectly placed over-under ball by Garoppolo, beautiful pass. And then Garoppolo being a pro, staying calm in the pocket against the zero blitz and throwing for the touchdown. So that's the stuff that he can give you in this offense. The play calling, the overall personnel, that stuff can win you games, plenty of games this season. But then there's that mystery of the Trey Lance situation sitting on the bench, hand chosen by Kyle for this offense. Kind of like how we talked about last week with Sean McVay's offense, opening up vertically with the addition of Stafford's arm strength. The 49ers offense could do the same thing with a dynamic mobile quarterback. The moving piece that Shanahan utilizes, throwing somebody like that into this mix. But there's a reason we all thought coming out for the handbook last year that Lance was the least NFL ready of the first rounders this year. The FCS jump, his inexperience even at the FCS level, those are real reasons for pause. So maybe more than something like the Field situation, for example, where I think we're all kind of in agreement that you kind of got to just let him go, get him his offense and let it start rolling. I think there's legitimate excuses for the 49ers to stay patient with their quarterback situation. But I trust Kyle Shanahan to, whenever he thinks that the kid's ready, I think this offense has a really high ceiling.
It would be hard to make a change at 3-0, would it not? Because I know they're not 3-0. They're 2-1. But
you're winning games.
They did everything but win that game at the end. They left Aaron Rodgers 37 seconds. That's what we're talking about.
The ceiling might be capped, but they're competitive weekend.
Yeah, but Mark, I take John's side completely on this. We're not making the change right now, but that's kind of exactly what John is saying. Is he's saying the situation's been laid out so well. Trey Lance, we both believed going into this whole thing wasn't going to be ready. We talked about the shortened offseason, that he barely had any practice time to get up to speed with different things there. And he was going to have the longest runway of any of these 5 first-round quarterbacks to begin with. So I think John is spot on when he says that it's got to be this for now. But the reason why it's happening is a different thing than who should play this Sunday, right? We've got to separate those two. They don't necessarily disagree with each other. I want to add just 2 quick points to kind of support John here. Number one, the 49ers are 5th in blocking total points so far this year. So the offense, that's been their best unit on offense, right? We talk about in terms of passing, 19th, in terms of rushing, 16th, in terms of receiving, 20th. It's been that blocking unit that's been the best, which actually kind of surprised me after seeing Alex Mack really struggle last week. Alex Mack, I know we talked about this a little bit last night at Scout School, John, a guy that I absolutely love as a player, loved since he was in Cleveland back at the time with me. Also, a fantastic person and worker as well as a football player. Did not look like himself. They put somebody over him in the 0 or the 1 technique that he was having to deal with right away. It affected his ability to even snap the ball accurately, let alone he missed some bad blocks out there. So surprised me there. But the reason why I think they're 5th in blocking total points has a lot to do with all of what John was saying before about how they're masquerading things. And really what I'm interested in the 49ers and what kind of caught me as I was watching that beautiful offensive sequence in the first half, John, was we're used to Shanahan. His last name is Shanahan. We think outside zone, right? It's going to be zone stuff. It's going to be stretch zone. It's going to be some form of a zone scheme that he's going to marry to the play action. All of a sudden, we're starting to see in an NFL where gap scheme runs tend to be more efficient on average than zone scheme runs. He's starting to incorporate a lot of these gap scheme concepts and marrying them to the play action, right? You see all kinds of pullers coming across. You see false pullers all over the place. And then you think about how Trey Lance is going to fit into that. I'm so excited for the day. Like if he is ready anytime soon or every time they come out with one of these goal line packages, the possibilities for what Kyle could be doing in terms of marrying his love of the play action and all the things that historically have married so well with the zone running game with that, and being able to incorporate some of these concepts that are coming up from the lower levels where you see some really successful gap scheme concepts that can also be married with that. So I'm super pumped for that day that we're all waiting for. I just don't think it's yet.
All right, John, I want to stick with you here, and I want to revisit a question that I asked last week because you kind of tweaked Kirk Cousins a little bit last week, if I'm not mistaken, and he came out and he had a terrific game for Minnesota on Sunday after we talked about the Vikings briefly. What's your take on him now?
He's been playing really good football this season, and I just know that from, again, back in his days in Washington, and then even in his time in Minnesota, it's been mostly good, and then the bad is just kind of backbreaking bad in crucial moments or just long term over the full season kind of scope of things. Certainly a very good starting quarterback, but it's just can you win because of quarterback instead of a guy you win with kind of thing. So, but he's playing really good football right now. 8 touchdowns, no picks, still first in catchable percentage, second in on-target percentage, top 5 in adjusted net yards per attempt, 4th in points earned, all the numbers there. Now the average throw depth is very low. The intended air yards are low. They've got KJ Osborne gets some of the deep shots, but otherwise it's a lot of underneath stuff to Jefferson and Thielen, and then running the ball efficiently with Kirk or Madison last week, obviously. But he's still making some of the splash plays. He's always been underrated, throwing on the move and using his legs, made some big plays in that area, and he's not sacrificing the ball security so far doing that. So big win against the Seahawks last week, and then a big matchup coming up against the Browns that we talked about.
If you can believe this, he is now number 5 in our best quarterback in the world rankings, behind Mahomes, Rodgers, and Brady, and Deshaun Watson, who's out. So really, he's number 4. He's just ahead of Russell Wilson. They're basically even. In fact, they're legitimately even. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr. So Stafford, who was 15th at the start of the season, he's now 9th. And Kirk Cousins, who was 9th at the start of the season, moves up to 5. Those rankings based on total points above average accumulated over extended periods of time. So cap tip, Kirk Cousins. All right, Matt, on the Cowboys, were there any surprises for you after watching the Cowboys decimate the Eagles?
Yeah, I certainly expected that game. What I was surprised by when I looked back after the game at the statistics, that the Cowboys are just 1 spot ahead of the Eagles in our total points ratings on the team level. So the Cowboys are 12th in total points on a team level, and the Eagles are 13th. So that actually really surprised me a bunch because there have been some really good signs from the Cowboys. They've got Micah Parsons in a better position. He's not out there looking lost at linebacker, getting abused by Tom Brady. He's rushing the passer, doing what he should be doing. Trayvon Diggs has been as good as he's looked in the early part of his career. So that there have been some really good things there. But suddenly, I'm kind of concerned about the Cowboys. I've been on them all year heading in. I thought it was going to be a cakewalk for them to win the NFC East, and I still really believe that. But the La'el Collins news was weird. He apparently missed like 7 drug tests and then tried to appeal the suspension to get it down to 2 when it was a 2-game suspension, and they actually reinstated it back up to a 5-game suspension. So like bizarre stuff, and not the first time bizarre stuff's happened with Lyle Collins. So I'm kind of concerned there. And then Mike McCarthy doesn't really make me feel a whole bunch of confidence in terms of the way he manages the game. He's certainly improved and he's come along in the way that he does that stuff a little bit, but it still does not breed confidence at all when you're watching him try to manage those situations. So the thing that surprised me after watching it was it happened exactly like I thought it would happen. And somehow I feel less good about the Cowboys than I did before they won, 34-14.
That's weird because you were so high on them last week, certainly.
They're good. Right. I don't know if they can be that, we said a sleeper Super Bowl contender. That's the part where I'm a little bit like, I'm not sure.
So 2 other quick ones. Let's do these quick before we preview week 4. We asked this last week. We ask it again this week. Is there a team or player that's better than it's shown through the first 3 weeks of the season? John, your take on this.
I just thought of the game that I talked about with Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. Seattle being 1-2 is a big surprise for me, especially when you see Russell Wilson has no interceptions this year. Chris Carson's had success on the ground, except for when they needed to hold that lead against the Titans in week 2. They didn't have any rushing success, but Lockett and Metcalf have gotten off to good starts. So the stars on offense are producing. But if we didn't already know from the past couple of years, the Legion of Boom is long gone in Seattle. Their defense is last in the NFL in passes defensed. One of 4 teams without an interception this year. Top 5 in having tackles broken and missed. Worst in the NFL in allowing yards after contact on the ground. They have a lot of similar personnel to last year's unit. Pretty much mostly just missing KJ Wright, who left and is now back up in Las Vegas, I think. But the last year's unit also had its struggles. But that team became known for making big plays in crucial moments, that bend but don't break mentality. So if they can shore up a few of those issues, get back to being opportunistic as a defense, and letting the offense carry them, they can get back in the mix. But we've talked about it. This is a tough division, so they need to turn that around quickly.
My hope of having 4 NFC West teams in the playoffs took a hit last week, certainly with the Seahawks losing to the Vikings in the final seconds of the 49ers-Packers game. Matt, what's your better than they've shown?
I mean, I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody, but I do hear some people starting to panic about the Chiefs at 1-2, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous. They're in a tough division, but I still think they're the strongest team in there, and they're best positioned despite how the season has started. Remember, before the season began, we said that it would take some time for the offensive line to gel. We're seeing that play out. It wasn't going to be that the offensive line was going to come in, we were going to snap our fingers, and suddenly, they were going to have a top offensive line in the league. This is the nature of offensive lines. It takes time for them to get there. There'll be some growing pains. There's still the 4th offense in the league so far, but obviously it hasn't been, they're 1-2. And they're not playing great. The defense has not been good. They've been 31st in the NFL. But the good news there is there's not a lot of space to get worse. I mean, if you're giving up a touchdown every time your opponents get into the red zone, you can't do worse than that. So they've got to get back to being something complimentary. I think as the offensive line gels, I think it's ridiculous to panic about Mahomes. I've heard some Mahomes panic. He's 3rd in total points and 3rd in total points per 60 plays. He's doing just fine. He's still Patrick Mahomes. They're going to figure out the way teams have been defending against Tyreek Hill and get the weapons going on offense. I have no concerns about that beyond Andy Reid's health in terms of being able to make sure that they can make the changes that they need. So I think that everybody needs to pump their brakes a little bit if we're going to panic on the Chiefs. If you're out there and trying to bet on football, this would be a great time to buy because this is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. They're still up there as right in the top mix for me in terms of who I would put in the Super Bowl as of today. So if you can get a better price on them, then maybe that's some good news. One thing to look out for, Chris Jones, 52nd in the NFL in pass rush points saved, just 3 points saved so far through 3 games. Not great, not really good production out of him. I haven't liked what I've seen with him moving out to defensive end. I think he belongs back on the inside. We'll see if that's a move that they actually decide to engage in at any sort of point. I don't think they're there yet, but I would keep an eye on that if the struggles continue to this level, because at that point, why not change something?
One more quick take. Some coach decision-making moments from week 3. Titans went for 2, up 7. Colts kicked on 4th and goal, down 9. I know you wanted to speak out on this.
Yeah, really fascinating ones when watching the game strategy here. So the Titans going for 2 was super interesting. They scored, right? They're up 1. They score to go up by 7 before they have the decision on what to do. Usually you see teams kick here, go up by 8, force the other team to go for 2 if they score. But they have Derrick Henry. And I think Vrabel did something really smart here. He said, we like our chances of making a 2 better than we like our ability to stop you going for 2, right? So he put the pedal to the metal. He took Derrick Henry, gave him the ball. Derrick Henry walked into the end zone. Titans go up by 9, completely changed the complexion of the fourth quarter. They're playing a 2-score game instead of a 1-score game the whole way. So the decision came down to, if you're assuming that the Colts are going to score a touchdown in the way you're making this decision. If they were to score that touchdown, do we want to be on defense with them going for 2, or would we rather be on offense going for 2 right now? And he said, I've got Derrick Henry, I'm going for 2. And my question, and maybe John, I'd love to hear what your opinion is on this. If you have a Derrick Henry, if you have a Lamar Jackson, right, like we saw on that 4th and 1 play at the end of the game, how long before going for 2 becomes your default?
It takes some of those X factor players like that, where it's just, especially in tight quarters, when if you've got like a spread out offense and stuff, that might factor things differently. But if you've got a dominant X factor in the run game, that does make things a bit easier. And it matters with game flow and everything. I love the aggressive mentality as well from the Titans there. I think when you're in that situation, when you're up by 1, you score to go up by 7, and you have that decision, it kind of lets you play with house money a little bit, where you could just, if you miss the 2-point conversion, then it's just a standard 7-point game. Nothing really changes with your kind of mentality of how the rest of the game moves forward. But you go for 2 there, that changes everything. Like you said, I love the confidence in the team. You have that X factor in a Derrick Henry, a dominant factor in the run game that is tough to stop in close quarters. Might as well take a shot there. Yeah, it could become more of a norm and as a default go for 2 situation.
I'd rather have Derrick Henry on my side trying to get 2 yards than to be forcing my defense. Like, I don't know if anybody's lined up and played goal line defense before. It's real hard when you've got Jonathan Taylor coming downhill at you. And even if you hit him at the 2-yard line, you still got to make sure he doesn't cross that white stripe.
I've always loved the mentality. If you're the defense, if you think about it from the defense's perspective, what do you not want to see?
Right.
You're hoping that the team sends their extra point unit out there, give us a chance, 1 possession game. That offense stays on the field and they've lined up in a heavy package and they got Derrick Henry back there. That's the last thing they want to see. So I've always loved that mentality of, if you're trying to decide game situation and all that stuff, you go around with the odds and everything like that. Just think about it from the defense's perspective. What do they not want to have happen? Right. Just schematically of strategy-wise, what the offense is going to put out there. And that was exactly the last thing they wanted to see.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I'm really curious to see, we've seen experiments with this before, like the Steelers a couple years ago. The Ravens at times have done this sort of thing. But I'm really curious to see, as the rules continue to favor offense in the NFL, and we're protecting the quarterbacks and we're making it easier and easier for it to be a higher scoring environment league, are we going to cross that point where offenses are better than defenses? And so this is clearly a better than 50% proposition. And once you get to 50%, extra points aren't 100% anymore. Once you get to 50%, going for 2, unless you're in a late game where there's a strategic reason not to, in my opinion, that should be the baseline. But we just haven't gotten there yet. The other situation, just real quick, that I wanted to touch on in this game was a sort of interesting one. The Colts had a 4th and goal down by 9 after that, right in the fourth quarter, where they got to around the 5-yard line, and they had the decision kicked there on 4th and goal, and then we'll try to score the touchdown later. Let's make it a 6-point game. They try to score the touchdown later. There was one where we're just looking at our win probability stuff. We would actually recommend going for it there, trying to score the touchdown, even though it's 4th down, because you've already gotten down to the 5-yard line. Our model really hates kicks that are under 30 yards. And so that was a sort of counterintuitive one. You'll hear me be real passionate about 2-point conversions. I'm a little bit more reserved in what I would recommend for this situation, because it does make sense to me to make it a 1-score game. But if you think about it, you miss that play right there. You still have the opponent backed up. There's an argument to go in the other direction, which is actually you should be trying to score there on that 4th down. So I thought that was an interesting one too. Less clear cut to me, but definitely fascinating.
I love that one because I watch games all the time, and I'm saying that if you got this far, get the extra 3 to 4 yards and get the 6. And you worry about it'll be easier. It's a better game for you to try and make a 45 or a 50-yard field goal at the end than to try to drive to score a touchdown to win.
I think you're absolutely right, even though the intuition is we don't want to lose the game on this play.
And on the Titans one, I would say it's kind of like you're watching Jeopardy and you get the daily double. You go for the kill when you have the chance to go for the kill. You play to try and end the game if you feel your team is confident right there to go. You want to go up 9. 9 makes it a lot harder to beat you than 8 does.
Well, if you got Matt Amodio on your team, absolutely.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back with a segue into week 4. Matt, what was the coolest thing you looked up on the SIS DataHub Pro this week?
Checking out this DataHub Pro, the Browns, not 1, not 2, 3 of the top 7 running backs in the NFL in total points per 60 snaps. Nick Chubb, number 7. They've been not using him too much, but he's been very efficient. Kareem Hunt is number one. That won't surprise anybody that's seen them play, especially last week. But Demetric Felton at number 3, I thought was also pretty fascinating. That's 3 of the top 7 in terms of running back efficiency. Rounding out that top 5, you have Tony Pollard, Alex Collins, and Derrick Henry in there. Obviously, guys that have played really well so far this year. I thought that was fascinating. These are running backs who have certainly mattered through the first 3 games of the season. And how about 3 of them, 3 of the top 7 on the same team? That's good news for the Browns.
You can get total points at SISDataHub.com. At DataHub Pro, our second version, you can do that total points per 60 snaps. Plenty of advanced stats, season filters. If you're looking for basic things, DataHub's a good way to go. How does one player compare to the other? It's pretty good for that. If you're looking for something a little more robust, we do have the pay version for both college and pro. Go to SISDataHub.com, poke around, see what you can find. All right, so let's talk week 4. And we start obviously with Patriots and Bucs on Sunday night. Brady Belichick, Gronk Belichick. Is Mac Jones ready for prime time? Matt, what do you want to talk about from this game? I presume one of those 3.
Yeah, Brady and Belichick. The cat and mouse game should be pretty interesting. So Brady finally, I think, started this season to get a little bit too pass happy, right? And I think the Bucs sort of lost a little bit of their balance and could use getting back in that direction a little bit. Brady's always been much more comfortable when he's controlling the pass rush through the run game and all that kind of stuff. And I think it might be exactly what he needs to face the Patriots, because I would think that Belichick would be trying to incentivize Brady to hand the ball off as much as possible. I think he's, would want to basically be showing as much too high as possible, trying to influence Brady to get the ball out of his hands. That said, I could also see a scenario where Belichick's looking at this matchup and saying, no, you know what? When the Bucs get into trouble, it's when they lose that balance. So I want to entice him to actually pass the ball too much so that we can get the pass rush going, get him to make mistakes, get his pads dirty. Because if you want to beat Brady, that's the best way to do it, is getting him dirty out there. So I'm really excited to see how that cat and mouse game plays out.
From my perspective, just from the fan perspective, I mean, it's a crazy game of storyline. It's going to be emotionally charged night in Foxborough. You already got the Adele commercial going around and everything that's getting all Patriots fans in their feelings. But I'd say, what are the odds of Brady getting to become the NFL all-time leading passer back in Foxborough? But the NFL scheduled this game. They did the math on how many yards he'd average first 3 weeks to make this a real show. Although I'm not sure the NFL expect him to be second in the NFL in passing yards. So he almost broke it a week early last week and kind of ruined the whole thing. But this means a lot to both of them, Brady and Belichick. They're both not going to act like it matters. I can see Brady deferring a lot potentially to do whatever it takes to win. I know that matters more to him than putting up 500 yards and like showing up the Patriots or anything. But like Matt said, maybe this is a week that the running game gets going. They definitely need it to get some of that balance going back. But I'm fascinated to see Belichick's defense against Brady for the first time ever, kind of the first time we get a real taste of that old coach versus quarterback debate. For me, I just think it's going to be Todd Bowles is going to, on the other side of things, Todd Bowles is going to heat up Mac Jones, a rookie quarterback, defensively, and it'll be a comfortable Bucs win for me. To
put a bow on this game, give me a name that you have not said yet that will be impactful in this game.
I think it'll be the Devin White, let's say. It's somebody up the middle, rushing from exotic places from Todd Bowles to get in Mac Jones' face and make things uncomfortable for a rookie quarterback.
Matt, one name you haven't said so far. Who you got?
The name that I would say to look out for is our tied for number 3 in points saved amongst corners this year, J.C. Jackson. J.C. Jackson and that whole Patriots secondary, if they can start to make some plays on the football, then I think that would change the complexion of this game. So I'll start with J.C. Jackson.
Nice. Go a little deeper. That's what we do here. All right, let's go to the team that I think our guys think is the best team in the NFC, Rams Cardinals. We're not talking about the Cardinals. John, what do you want to talk about from this game? I think the thing that just happened was that the Rams just had a prove-it game. Is this one for the Cardinals?
Yeah, we talked a lot about the Rams last week. They went out and put up a great show, a huge game. And so now this is the big game on the other side for the Cardinals coming up. I think they're going to be in the mix regardless if they win this game or not. I think they've got a really good team, but it's definitely a prove-it game for them to put the division and the league officially on notice if they can put up a good performance against the Rams here. I think the marriage of Kingsbury's air raid scheme and Kyler Murray's playmaking, comfortability in that spread out 4-wide offense, everything opened up, has gotten better and better each year that he's been in the league. Kingsbury said all those years ago he'd take Kyler number 1 overall when he was still coaching in college, and he was a man of his word then. He did it. He's proving it now with how well they mesh, and he's making things operate perfectly to Kyler's skill set. Kyler himself knows how to operate within the scheme on schedule. And then he's just one of the most special players in the league off schedule. Plus, I think they've got a great backfield stylistic tandem between Edmonds being the between the 20s guy as the pass catcher when things are spread out, and then James Conner to punch it in close, put in a lot of touchdowns already, being a touchdown vulture for fantasy and everything. So I think the Cardinals have a really good team. I think this is going to be a fantastic game. I'm really interested to see how the Cardinals can stack up.
And for this game, I think Matt's got stats. Matt, what do you got?
Yeah, Mark, here's your signpost. I'm going to tell you lots of reasons why I think the Cardinals should have a chance. But in actuality, I really do still like the Rams here. I have much more confidence in them so far this year. So they are the number 1 and number 2 teams in total points so far this year. But it's the Cardinals that are number 1 and the Rams that are number 2 through 3 weeks. That would surprise some people, I'm sure. Also, no surprise, Cooper Kupp leads wide receivers in total points. But Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore are actually ahead of him on a per play basis. Kupp is 4th, Rondale Moore is 2nd, Christian Kirk 3rd. So 2 receivers that are outpacing Kupp in terms of on a per snap basis, what they're doing. And the Cardinals are surprisingly, probably most surprisingly, number 2 in total points on defense on the strength of their number 1 pass rush. So obviously, the outlier performance by Chandler Jones in week 1 certainly helps that rating. But this is going to be a huge challenge against the Rams. I think going to Los Angeles, I still have a lot more confidence in what the Rams have done. In all the things that don't stand out on the stat sheet, they haven't been anything to sneeze at. Number 2 in total points. Some really impressive numbers for the Cardinals through 3 weeks so far, and it'll be a fascinating game. This is just grab the popcorn and enjoy it.
Go a little deeper here. If the Rams were to start 4-0, can you see a scenario where they're 13-4, 14-3?
Yeah, I thought you were going to say 17-0, and I was going to say absolutely not. I don't.
I went a little more conservative.
But yeah, I think the Rams, right now when you look at their talent, so we knew coming into the year, we felt good about their defense. We feel good about Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, and what they've put together despite the loss of the coordinator. We felt good about that. We obviously love Sean McVay, what he brings from a coaching perspective. The quarterback change was the big question coming into things. With the quarterback change, the way that it's gone so far, it looks like it's about as good as if we looked at like it could have gone bad, it could have gone good. This has been on the best side of how the good would have looked. So if Stafford stays healthy and if they can figure out how to get enough of a ground game going with a healthy Darrell Henderson or whatever else it might be, those would be the question marks, the health there. But there's every reason to believe right now that this team is on the plus side of any error bars in terms of what we thought their performance could have been this year.
And going back to the team building perspective as well, in the way that not just all the players that they brought in, but the way that they did them, that they've kind of gone against the grain in terms of trading first rounders, not valuing draft picks, going big on big star players that have actually performed. Obviously, if any of those guys don't hit, then that's going to kill you for it. But yeah, it was obviously a different strategy in terms of team building. And so far, that's been a big hit for them. So that might be another trend. Again, the NFL is all about trends and where things are moving. So if the Rams have a huge year this year and those stars that they traded for, Stafford and Ramsey and all those guys and big draft capital to get ready-made players in the NFL has panned out, then we could see a big shift in the way that teams value draft picks moving forward.
Last game, Raiders, Chargers, another game from the West, this one from the AFC. Justin Herbert's climbing up the quarterback rankings charts. The Raiders are off to a very surprising start. Derek Carr, at least in our QB rankings, actually took a step back last week, but he's still been very, very good this season. John, what do you want to talk about from this game?
Yeah, speaking of unorthodox team building, the offense that the Raiders have been running has been pretty unorthodox as well. It's unique. They've been doing stuff like running 4 verts out of 3 tight end sets. They're obviously one of the teams that utilize a fullback more than others. So Derek Carr's got the weapons to go downfield, and he's actually letting them make plays downfield, taking those chances, not just having the threat that a lot of teams use of just having a speed guy out there to open up things underneath, but he has the speed threats that he's actually given shots to downfield. They've been really impressive, throwing things at defenses that teams don't see too often. It's kind of coming from a different perspective there. And then defensively, they've just been getting after the quarterback in their pass rush. Max Crosby is going crazy. He still only has 2 sacks this season, but leads the league in pressures for us by a solid margin. So that's a recipe for success, throwing the ball and getting after the quarterback.
Yeah, Crosby's been just an absolute beast there. And I love what you're talking about. 4 verts out of the 3 tight end set. That's going to make any analytics person happy because we're always saying, pass out of those run sets and run out of those pass sets. So it's nice to see some success there. And there have been reasons to see that Gruden has started to embrace some of that stuff a little bit more, even though he'd never admit it. For me, Derek Carr probably took a step back on the total points scale because of that pick 6 that he had in the first half of last week's game. It did appear to be the receiver's fault. The receiver kind of stopped. Carr thought he would keep going, and it was an easy return. So that'll hurt you in terms of the total point scale. But he was able to keep this offense going. The game they had to claw back from behind, did it without Josh Jacobs, and the throw on the last possession to win the game that put them in field goal range for the game-winning field goal in overtime was absolutely a thing of beauty. When you talk about just arm talent, this is one of those arm talent throws where like we the Zach Wilson throwing across his body all those yards downfield, like we saw him in shorts and everybody got really excited at the pro day. Go turn on the film of that pass that Derek Carr made at the end of this game with people actually bearing down on him with the pressure of the moment and the window that he fit this ball into. Really impressive stuff. 3 weeks ago, we were talking about what to make of Derek Carr. It seems silly at this point because even pick six or no pick six, he's been awesome. Tough matchup this week, so we'll see how that plays out. But I'm so far so good from the Raiders in terms of what they've been able to put on film in these first 3 weeks.
Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers both making big throws at the end of games. All right, just to go a little deeper on this game, what is the reason that the Raiders might lose this game?
The Raiders continue to get in trouble, kind of. I don't know if Jacobs is playing or not. So without Jacobs, their offense struggled to run the ball. They kept committed to it, but it wasn't very efficient. So as good as the passing and the receivers have been, to the extent that up front they have issues, that's where they can get into trouble. The Chargers obviously have a really good pass rush. They've had that good pass rush for years. And then on the other side of the ball, if Justin Herbert can tear up their secondary, the secondary has been better so far this year for the Raiders. But I'm not buying that Gus Bradley has worked a miracle cure on what's gone on the back end there. It's still a lot of the same players that were there really struggling last year. And Justin Herbert just continues to be a guy that outshines all expectations of what everybody believed he was going to be. So those are the two things I look at: the Raiders' ability to run the ball against the Chargers, and then the Chargers' ability to pass the ball against the Raiders.
We've done 3 games. Let's pick one each for each of you. Games that you are particularly intrigued in that we haven't mentioned yet. John, start.
Yeah, one we haven't talked about is Ravens and Broncos. A bit under the radar, but this is one of the few 3-0 versus 2-1 matchups this week. I'm a bit surprised to see the Broncos favored by 1. It has to be the home field advantage factor, but we've talked about how the Broncos haven't really been tested much in their undefeated start so far this year. And obviously it took a record-breaking field goal to beat the Lions, but this is still a Ravens team that beat the Chiefs 2 weeks ago. Talked about prove-it games. This is a huge prove-it game, prove you the real deal game for the Broncos on Sunday. So that'll be a big test for them. Ravens going west to play out in Denver.
Justin Tucker for MVP. Matt, I think you got 2 here. We'll let you cheat and do 2 if you want.
For me, there's a matchup of 2 teams that are feeling real good about themselves. That between the Panthers and the Cowboys, I'm very excited to see how that shakes out. I thought the Panthers got a little bit of a lucky kind of injury battle in terms of the luck that they had last week. But then at the same time, they had some unluckiness in terms of their own injuries. McCaffrey going down, J.C. Horn. And I talked about the Cowboys a little bit earlier. They've been really good so far. This is a true test game. And then 2 teams feeling nervous. The Colts and the Dolphins. Really been a struggle for these 2 teams so far to start the year. A lot of pessimism coming out of both camps. If you lose this game on either side, it's, just sinking a little bit further. So those 2 games that I'm looking at, one kind of being a prove it and one kind of being, who's staying alive and who's maybe, I don't want to say packing it in, but going to have an uphill climb to make the playoffs.
Colts and Dolphins, 2 teams certainly wishing for better things than they've gotten from their quarterbacks, whether it's just health or performance. All right,
vaccines.
Or vaccines. Let's move on to scouts and stats to close the show. We do this each week. We do a statistical take on one thing. We do a scouting take on one thing. We'll start with the scouting take. John, what player are you most looking forward to watching in week 4 from a scouting perspective?
Yeah, I'll stick in that Broncos-Ravens game I mentioned and go with my guy from this past year's handbook, Devontae Williams of the Broncos. He's had a decent start running the ball. He and Melvin Gordon have essentially split carries 50-50. Gordon's had a bit more success, but he had a 70-yard touchdown in week 1, so that kind of skews things a bit. You take that out, things are much more even. But I think the main reason that Devontae's going to be heavily relied upon this week is third downs for exceptional pass protection skills. He got an excellent grade from me in that area coming out last year, which is a very uncommon trait to see in a young running back, to be especially not just have the ability to do so, but be trusted to do so for your offense and your quarterback. He's a fantastic pass protector, toughness, technique, vision. He'll stand in there and take on guys head on. He's not just going to cut guys. He'll stand you up. That's going to be really needed this week against the Ravens defense and Wink Martindale, their defensive coordinator, who absolutely loves to throw chaotic, confusing blitz pressures at teams on third downs especially. So Devontae's going to need to come up clutch and picking up a few free rushes if the Broncos want to stay in this game.
Matt?
Yeah, it was super interesting, but just on that point, seeing Wink not blitz against Patrick Mahomes a couple weeks ago. But yeah, that's certainly been his MO most of the time. That was definitely an aberration from what he usually does. For me, the player that I'm interested in is Asante Samuel Jr. He leads all non-quarterbacks in total points through 3 games. The diminutive corner has been targeted 12 times. He's allowed 0 completions, 2 passes broken up, and 2 interceptions. After Antoine Winfield Jr. last year in the second round, undersized defensive backs. Now Asante Samuel Jr. this year, second round, undersized defensive backs. I'm starting to sense a pattern here. And, sign me up for any of those guys if we got any of them coming out this year.
Matt's got stats. Good stuff, Matt. Good stuff, John. All right, so this wraps up the Off the Charts Football Podcast for Week 4. You can find our content all over the internet. Our Twitter is sportsinfo_SIS. Our articles looking at matchups and prop bet possibilities are up at Sharp Football Analysis. For stats, check out SISDataHub.com. We've got lots more good content coming, so keep your eyes peeled for that. For Matt Manocherian, John Todd, and our producer Justin Stein, I'm Mark Simon. Thank you for listening to the Off the Charts Football Podcast.